Hello everyone, thank you for joining us in this session of our webinar series. My name is Roland and today we are joined by Tally's very own Larry Feige and Mike Brownson of Westell Technologies. We'll be talking about UL 2524, what it is, why it is, and what it includes. But before we do, I'd like to introduce Larry Feige. Larry, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Larry Feige. I've been with Tally 14 plus years, in the industry 40 plus years, and we're here today to bring you Westell Demystifying UL 2524, and it's going to be presented by Mike Brownson. And Mike has also had extensive time in the industry. Mike Brownson, Westell, please take it away.
Oh, thank you, Larry. As Larry noted, I've been around the industry for a while, also 40 plus years, and started actually in the in-building wireless space. My first project was over 20 years ago. I was fortunate to have been in the business in an area where the public safety radio was early mandated, City of Denver. So I had a project I was involved with them, actually one of their very first projects in the city, for in-building radio coverage for their 800 meg radio system. A little bit of background there. And I'm the Director of Business Development with Westell. So I wear a lot of hats there. I help with marketing, but I've also been very involved in the product development side. Given the years in the industry and my relationships throughout the industry and throughout the country, I hear a lot about what the integrators want, what the AHJs want, some of the challenges. And so this is talking about UL 2524. All right, so for those that aren't familiar with what UL 2524 is, we'll tell you that, and we'll provide a little bit of background into what it is, why it is, and what it includes. But essentially, it's the new UL standard specifically for public safety BDAs and active components. So let's first talk about the role of UL and the other nationally recognized testing labs. All right, so UL actually is two totally separate companies, right? There's a standards organization, which is the original UL. It goes way back, I think over 100 years now. Some relationship to Thomas Edison, I hear. Anyhow, so you got that UL that basically it's a nonprofit organization that writes the standards through input, peer input, industry input, and creates these standards. And then you have the UL that's one of 19 nationally recognized testing labs. So on the screen here, we see, the logos of all of the NERDLs. Now, not all NERDLs can test to all standards. There's some specialties, but just wanted to explain that the UL is just one of actually a couple of different ANSI recognized standards organizations. So that's where the UL 2524 came about. So back in December of 2017, the UL engineers first published an outline for investigation. Then after almost a year of public input, and there's also a standards technical panel that looks at this public input and they debate things and then decide what the final version is and vote on it. It was approved as an ANSI standard in October 18th of 2018. Since then, the industry's been working hard to come up with the solutions because we know that more demand, more opportunity for listed BDAs is coming. When we look at what UL 2524 addresses, okay, first let me be very clear, it only addresses the active components. All right, and there's a handful of parts to it. All right, so one aspect of it is they test for the risk of fire and shock, right? Because they don't want to be, to have BDAs going out in the market that are hazardous or going to cause a fire. They also test for water resistance. So that's that NEMA 4, although NEMA 4 is actually self-tested, this would be tested by a NERDL to that NEMA type 4 water resistance. There's also standards in there that mandate testing for the basic IFC, NFPA type functionality, such as do the alarms work, does oscillation management, that sort of thing. Does it do the sort of functions that are mandated by code? So the things that are not addressed are things like the design of a system, the installation of a system, the commissioning of a system, and of course then all of the other non-powered components like coax and splitters and fiber. So none of that's included. So I guess one of my cautions there is, in my 20 years of in-building wireless experience, the performance and reliability of a public safety DAS system probably is 90% has to do with the design, the install, and the commissioning, and about 10% is the equipment itself. Well, so UL 2524 addresses that 10%, all right? I'm not saying it's not needed. There's benefits to it, but if there's a BDA manufacturer out there that's claiming that a UL 2524 listed solution is going to assure firefighters and first responders that they're going to have reliable, consistent communications in buildings, and maybe not. Take that with a grain of salt, okay? So we just got to be able to filter through some of the claims of what UL 2524 is and what it isn't. So digging a little deeper, a lot of, for example, like all Westell BDAs, we get them all UL listed for electrical safety under the industrial standard equipment, which was UL 60950, and that's being sunset and being replaced by UL 62368. So when you look at UL 2524 testing standard, an awful lot of it, like maybe even about half of the document, is that testing. All right. So what we do at Westell is we first get that listing under 60950 or now 62368, and then we submit it to 2524 because, well, that means all of that testing is already done by a NERDL, so they can use that. And then to that, they'll do the water testing, which is part of UL 508. And the NFPA functionality, like I said, that's like verifying the oscillation protection, the functionality of the alarms. If there's devices, for example, like the remote enunciator connection to the BDA BBU, that line needs to be monitored for integrity. So if there's a fault there, an open or a short to ground, you'll get a notification of that. Now, there's also additional durability testing. All right, so they'll test for how hot the components get. They'll do some strike tests. So that's also a small part of the testing standard. But I want you to notice there's absolutely no RF performance testing in UL 2524. Right? UL leaves that up to the FCC because FCC Part 90 explains pretty well the RF performance requirements, predominantly things like spurious noise, that sort of thing. So they let the FCC do what they do best, and UL does what they do best, which is really measuring safety and compliance with standards. All right. The other thing, because this is all about demystifying. So what I'm doing is I'm taking some of the myths that we've heard, or some of the misunderstandings that I've heard, and trying to clarify them for y'all. So one of that is there's different marks for tested products, all right? Listed and certified are the only ones that that to the AHJ actually really count, okay? Because listed and certified tells us that the equipment has undergone the full range of tests, okay? Not just pick and choose. You can't really do that and claim that you tested by a NERDL. Well, you can actually. There's a different classification for that. It's called classified. So if a product is classified to a standard, that means that the manufacturer was able to pick and choose what they wanted it to test to. All right. So it is not the same as a listing, because they could still be failing the standard in areas, and they just chose not to test that area. Now, UL recognize that really only applies to subcomponents. All right. So, for example, like the power supply modules that we use inside our BDAs, they're made by another company, and they have a UL recognized mark, that backwards UR symbol that you see there on the screen. Another example is the battery kits that we offer for our listed BDAs. Those will also have that recognized mark. Now, if a product says that it complies with or conforms to, who cares? All that means is the manufacturer claims that they built it with the intent to pass the standard, but with no testing done at all. So from the fire inspector's perspective, that should be pretty meaningless. But UL 2524 includes testing for the BDA, the battery backup, and a remote enunciator, or an enunciator panel. They don't really specify it needs to be a remote. So, you know, if I'm going to come out with just a BDA and I don't make BBUs or enunciators, can I actually get a UL listing? I have to admit, I'm still a little confused. One nerdle that we talked to said, no, you got to submit it as a system. Another nerdle we talked to said, yeah, we can list just one piece. Now, I don't really understand that because, for example, like the circuit integrity. So if I have a BD, let's say battery backup unit and a remote enunciator made by somebody else, and I put it onto a BDA who claims to be UL listed to 2524, well, how do I know that that circuit integrity is going to really work between those two devices? All right, so unless it's tested as a system, you know, I'm not sure that really counts. So now really, why is UL 2524 important, or why is it going to be important in the future? Well, here's the big news. So the 2021 version of IFC 510 is done, it's out. And within that standard, it actually says that equipment shall be listed to UL 2524 standard. So as cities adopt the latest code versions, I should say the future code versions, same for the 2022 version of NFPA, it's going to say it in there. So as cities adopt those, the industry is going to have to respond with equipment that meets this standard. I'm happy to say Westell was one of the first manufacturers to come out with a listed product. So, and we have a lot more in the queue. So something that we're very, very actively involved in. There's also one line in the last few versions of NFPA 72, section 10.3.1, if you want to look it up. It says the equipment constructed and installed in conformity with this code shall be listed for the purpose for which it is to be used. All right, that's the language right out of there. Now, you know, some inspectors have used that as justification for asking for a purposeful listing or appropriate listing today. You know, I have to say, now that we have a product, I'm happy to accept that interpretation. But again, that's kind of subject to interpretation by the AHJ. The other thing it does is it really provides assurance to the inspector that the equipment complies with the aspects of the code that equipment needs to comply with. All right, so, you know, in my conversation with, you know, with electrical and fire inspectors, there's a certain amount of concern about who's liable, you know, for if something doesn't go well. So in a way, this standards testing, having it tested by an independent testing lab, a certified OSHA recognized independent testing lab, and it takes some of that liability away from them. So that's one of the other reasons that a listing is important. As I mentioned, Westell came out with a product, a dual band 7800 megahertz public safety BDA half watt and 2 watt. And at the outset, we wanted to do 3 specific things. We wanted something that was going to be easier for the installer. We wanted something that was going to be easier to get the AHJ approval. And at the same time, we wanted to provide price leadership. We know it's a competitive business. The product efficiency, you know, how well it meets the needs and how efficiently we can do it is all part of that. So, and cost factors into that. So here's a bit of a list of the things that we've added. So what we did is we took our existing PS series Class B BDA, which is, we've been out for years. Folks love them. They're one of the more common in the industry. And then we added about a dozen improvements. We now in the half watt, 2 watt use the same chassis. For anyone that's used to our 2 watt unit, it's roughly the same size and configuration as it. As you can see, the size there, it's actually about half the size of many of our competitors out there. So it's a very compact unit. So it doesn't take up a lot of space on the wall. So when we talked about something that the AHJs like, well, these telecom closets are often really crowded. So we got to keep into account the overall size, the footprint. So one of the things we did is we added a front panel enunciator. If this BDA is going to be or able to go into the fire control room or wherever that enunciation is needed, then this eliminates the expense of that additional remote enunciator. So not even needed. Now, yes, we are working on our own remote enunciator, so that will be out. I'm not going to say when yet, but we're working on it. The other thing we did is we changed how the BDA's connections are working. So you see on the right there, that's utilizing the conduit fitting. So with every BDA, we provide both the cable grip, the watertight cable grips, as well as this liquid type flex conduit fittings. So now you have an option as an installer of, do I want to run cables in there, or do I want to have everything like this super clean looking install and have everything run in the conduit? So your call there, but we wanted to provide that option because well, I know, for example, I was talking to a gentleman in Southern Cal, and they're having to take the BDA they're using now that has all these big connectors on the bottom, and they run flex tight right up to the connector and then heat shrink it in order to make that assembly watertight. So I think this is a much cleaner solution. And also provides for one of the smallest footprints. So one of the things we do is we actually built the battery backup and alarming circuitry directly into the BDA. So the box below is just a battery box. So that allows us to have a very small footprint, 26 wide by 4 foot high. So it's almost a half a sheet of plywood or quarter sheet of plywood that we can fit this on. So really reduce the overall footprint. NEMA 3R rated battery cabinet, wall mountable or floor, supports up to 160 amp hours. And we do now offer the battery kits. These are very high grade telecom style 10-year life batteries. We've added some additional alarm capability. So NFPA now asks for a system component fail alarm. Don't really specify what it is, so we added one called system component fail for those inspectors that just simply want to see it. All of our alarm contacts are Form C, so you get both normally open and normally closed contacts. Oh, I forgot, almost. We also added a alarm log, Web GUI based. So you can look back and see, you know, the last many thousands, well, hopefully there aren't thousands of alarms, but you can go back and look at the alarm log. You can sort by type of alarm, criticality. You can export to a CSV file. So we've added that as well. Oh, forgot as well. Audible Enunciator. So a lot of code, they want some audible enunciation on an alarm. So we have an Audible Enunciator that can be enabled or disabled during install already inside the BDA. So again, we've took a lot of these things that folks are looking for, and we built it all in. We also looked at how oscillation management works in BDAs. You know, and when I became aware a while back that there's some BDAs out there that during an oscillation event would just simply shut down. And this is a life safety system. The last thing you want a life safety system to do is just shut down when there's a problem. So we wanted our BDA to work as best as possible. All right, so what we did is we created this algorithm. I know it's a bit of an eye chart. It's not meant to study, but what it does basically is it finds the best possible operation available given the change in environment that caused the oscillation. And then it'll recheck a few times, not forever, but a few times to see if that changed. If it did, that goes back to original gain. Because yeah, maybe it's just a bay door that opened that usually doesn't. A big truck that drove by that caused a reflection. So some of these events are temporary, some are permanent. So it'll retry a few times. If it doesn't, it'll stay at that lowest gain where it's not causing us oscillation. If it's not remediable, it'll shut down. And anytime it's not operating at its original gain setting, you get an alarm. So you will know that this thing is not operating at full gain or at the gain that you set it to when you last commissioned and left it. So here's list pricing. So the top line is our half-watt BDA, then the 2-watt BDA, the BBC 003 is the battery cabinet. And the thing I want to point out here is while you may notice that the BDAs themselves perhaps, well, from our old price, they did actually go up. But keeping in mind that now we built the BBU circuitry into that, when you take the BDA and the battery cabinet together, when we compare that to our previous series, so here we have on the left our new series, our enhanced BDAs, and on the right we have our existing half-watt, 2-watt. We have a BBU 001. It lists for a little over $4,000. You add batteries. By the time you add all this up, we're now around or better than $1,000 less than we were before. We already had a very, very competitive price leadership position. Now we just trimmed another $1,000 off of it. So we're looking out for the integrator, trying to do what's best and help you win more deals. So with that, that was pretty much what I have.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to present this to us. Thank you all for attending. Please send any questions you may have to sales@tallycom.com or the phone number listed on the left, and be sure to reference this webinar. If you need technical or specific product support, the contact information for Westell is listed on the right. We'll be sure to get all of your questions answered. But Larry, if I have a question, how soon should I expect the response?
We will attempt to have your answers back between 24 and 48 hours.